It's time to engage, educate, and empower with Tracey Maxfield.
Happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Engage, Educate, and Empower, the podcast which aims to highlight the social issues, life challenges, and day-to-day problems that children, teenagers, and young adults around the world are dealing with. Today, I'm really excited because I have a very special guest, Mr. Kevin Lynch of the Quell Foundation here in the USA. Kevin and I actually connected a couple of years ago on the social media site LinkedIn, and even though I follow him on all his social media sites and see what the Quell Foundation's work is, I've never had the opportunity to actually speak with him. And so today, even though he has an extremely busy schedule, I feel most honored that he's given an hour of his time to appear on this podcast. So before you meet Kevin, I'd like to just quickly read out his bio. So Kevin's career as a public servant began as a 12-year veteran of the United States Naval Submarine Force, where he worked aboard many nuclear-powered vessels. When an unfortunate injury ended his military career, Kevin chose the healthcare sector to continue his commitment to caring for and fighting for others in their time of need. After he served his country, Kevin invested more than 16 years in the private sector, advancing his career as a member of senior management teams in 3 hospital systems. He also spent an additional 5 years of his career at HCA's East Florida Division office as a member of the managed care team. That experience brought him even closer to the provider community and the challenges they face in building future talent in the mental health profession. Kevin has extensive experience in healthcare contracting, financial modeling, business optimization, and operations management. Kevin strived to create a paradigm shift in the care and treatment of people who have a mental illness stems from the knowledge he gained and relationships he built while researching his graduate thesis, Mental Health in Massachusetts, a de facto criminal offense. His research acknowledged that the rates of suicide, opioid addiction, overdose, and incarceration directly correlates to the shortage and lack of access to mental health professionals. In 2015, Kevin created the Quell Foundation with a mission to reduce the number of suicides, overdoses, and incarcerations of people with mental health issues. Kevin actually said, "I formed the Quell Foundation because I believe we have the power to change the conversations about mental health and ignite true change that will benefit people all across our country. Plus, this is even bigger than the millions suffering from a mental health condition because we must also work to assist the families and care support systems that are doing their best to help the people they love." In June 2016, Kevin was invited to speak at the White House during the Making Healthcare Better series on mental health. His participation as a member of Panel 2, Deepening the Conversation on Mental Health, catapulted the Quell Foundation into the national spotlight. And most recently, Kevin delivered the commencement address to the Pennsylvania State University Health College of Health and Human Development. Since 2016, the foundation has distributed over $1 million to students attending nearly 400 universities and colleges in 47 different states across the country. During the current scholarship cycle, the foundation students represent 378 different post-secondary schools and 435 scholarships distributed, totaling $463,750,000. The 2019-20 scholarship cycle donates the most significant contribution amount for the foundation since its creation. Kevin holds a master's degree in healthcare policy and administration from Pennsylvania State University and a bachelor's degree in business administration from Lynn University, where he graduated summa cum laude. He is a lifetime member of the Disabled Americans Veterans and the United States Submarine Veterans Association. He lives in Falmouth, Massachusetts with his wife Karen and their dog, Camus. So we're going to have a very quick commercial break, and when we return, it will be my utmost pleasure to introduce you to Kevin Lynch. We'll be right back.
Tracey Maxfield is a retired nurse with over 36 years' experience in mental health and dementia. She has spent years studying, researching, and writing on dementia care, mental illness, and bullying in teenagers. Tracey struggled with chronic depression starting in her 20s, and after years of intense workplace stress, bullying, and harassment, her chronic depression intensified. Tracey wrote her book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole: My Journey Through Depression, as a way not to only relieve her stress and anxiety, but to help her friends and family better understand depression. The book became an international guide for mental health awareness, allowing Tracey to focus her attention on helping children, teenagers, and their parents work through mental health issues and bullying. She travels all over the world to meet with schools, mental health advocates, and experts in the mental health fields. She also offers online courses to help children, teenagers, and their parents work through issues, bringing families closer and to bring awareness to bullying in society. For more information on Tracey, her mission, the show, Tracey's book, and offered courses, visit traceymaxfield.com. You can see the latest news on mental health, upcoming guests on the podcast, read Tracey's blogs and articles, and more. Plus, follow Tracey all over social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to watch the podcasts. See her daily messages and motivation and learn about each podcast guest and experts. Plus, while you're on the website at traceymaxfield.com, be sure to sign up for the free monthly newsletter. Follow Tracey with her upcoming events, interviews, seasonal tips, and the latest articles discussing important mental health topics and issues. And when you subscribe, you'll get a free copy of Tracey's booklet, Why Our Kids Are Suffering and How We Can Help Them. Just go to traceymaxfield.com. Tracey is committed to bringing parents and their children closer, to battle bullying and bring awareness to the mental health of children. That's why Tracey is offering her online courses to any adults, parents, children, and teenagers struggling during those hard times. Sign up for the course at traceymaxfield.com. You'll receive 8 full modules, over 12 videos, resources, and support discussing mental health, mood disorders, eating disorders, behavioral disorders, social media, drugs, suicide, risks and signs, and much, much more. Plus, you'll get access to Tracey's private Facebook group for individuals going through the same thing you are. Connect with others and share ideas, support, and motivation with Tracey helping along the way. Tracey's online courses is now for a limited time available for only $158. See all information online at traceymaxfield.com, where a brighter future is possible.
So, welcome back, everybody. And as promised, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Kevin Lynch. Kevin, thank you so much. I know you have a really busy schedule, so I really appreciate you giving up some time to talk with me.
Tracey, thank you so much for having me here this afternoon. I'm thrilled.
So, in the background, we can see hashtag Lift the Mask, the Quell Foundation. Yes. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that, and you explain what it does, because right now you're making such an enormous impact on young adults, on kids, which is what our focus is of this podcast, and what your foundation is doing to help them. So please take it away.
Well, thank you so much. So the Quell Foundation, we're 4 years old now, almost 4.5 years old. And I started this foundation I started this foundation because I did a thesis. I wrote my thesis on mental health in America, and I had learned so much about this underserved population of people that I just felt compelled to do something. So I left my job in healthcare and started a not-for-profit organization with the goal of having a direct impact in reducing the number of suicides, overdoses, and the incarceration of people that live daily with the challenges of having a mental health diagnosis.
So yes, and I mean, I would imagine that your naval career, you must have seen obviously some mental health challenges there in the work that in the work that you were doing. I actually read your thesis. I don't know if you remember, but a couple of years ago you sent me a copy.
Yes.
So I'll just share briefly with the audience. So initially we connected on LinkedIn when I was arguing with you about statistics.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
and so I had made a post on social media that suicide was now the second leading cause of death. And I had received my information from the CDC, and it actually said second leading cause of death from 5 years old until 24. And you came back and said, well, that's not exactly true. It's actually this age. And so I'm very passionate, but I'm also stubborn. I'm like, no, it's true. I read it. And so we had a little bit of a spat on social media, and we both agreed that we were looking at different statistics, which in fact are still correct. I think the challenge is, of course, is that they're still not capturing the information on the ages of children. We know from occasional newspaper articles that a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old has died by suicide, but that's something that they're not collecting right now. But yeah, so that's how we initially connected. And so, yes, I apologize then, and I still apologize.
Not at all. I thought it was very, very educational exchange. I believe we helped each other, and it didn't take long for us to both realize that we're in the exact same space, fighting the same battle. So we joined forces, which
Yes.
was only to the benefit of the folks we're trying to help.
Absolutely, because I've said this many, many times. We all are in this together to try and help our kids. I do not believe one single person can go and do all this change. I think we're all in this together, and we all bring different gifts to the table that can connect with children, teenagers, young adults, even adults, because we know that sometimes parents are struggling with their own mental health challenges, and that directly will impact their children as well.
Of course.
So that's when you actually sent me your paper, and I read it, and it resonated so much, because I think what I'm trying to share with people, especially parents and teachers, and there's some that still don't get it, is that kids have mental illness. I mean, right? The statistics are.
Of course they do. Absolutely.
All mental illnesses show signs and symptoms by age 14, 75% by age 24. So that in itself tells us that if we're able to identify that the teenager, the child has a problem, and start supporting and helping them, we have a better long-term optimistic recovery.
We really do.
Right? Than if we go, no, you can't be depressed. You're a teenager. You're going through a stage. You're being difficult. It's your hormones. Because this is what I love. You've identified that we know that if we do not help these kids and they're left to seek support from maybe people that do not know, or are encouraging them to take drugs as a way to deal with it, or go into crime, that they go into a slippery slope. And so many that are incarcerated, I think the latest statistics, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they said up to 70% of those incarcerated and up to the age of 30 or 31 have an underlying mental illness.
That's correct. Unfortunately, here in the U.S., we closed a lot of our mental health care facilities in the early 70s. We favored community reintegration, and it really didn't get the funding that it needed long term. So as a result, we find a lot of the population who needs services end up, and while they're not exclusively our homeless population and those that are hospitalized, but there's a great deal of them that have been incarcerated for behaviors that are consistent with somebody who's unmedicated or does not have the proper treatment. So we know that in the absence of treatment, many people self-medicate, and that might look like drug abuse and substance abuse and alcohol misuse.
I agree. And I think, one of the biggest challenges I have is when I'm talking to parents and or teachers even, and I'm trying to explain to them that what we need to do is start teaching kids as young as possible, not necessarily about mental illness, but how to promote their own mental health, good brain health. And if we start teaching them about what is anxiety and stress and how to manage your stress and failure, we're a society where all of a sudden we're not allowed to fail anymore. And we need to reframe that. It's not failure. I call them learning opportunities, but if we're able to, explain to kids that, guess what, you're not always going to make the team. You may not get the grade you want, right? You may not, go out with that girl. If we're able to explain to them and help them develop strategies to cope with their feelings, they have a better chance as they go through each grade of becoming more resilient.
That's absolutely true, Tracey. And I also think that as a result of that, they'll be more accepting. I look forward to the day when we have normalized this conversation around mental health and is no longer an outlier. It's just a conversation that we have. We don't, we don't alienate or ostracize folks who may have diabetes or some other physical illness, but we do that with mental health. And I think by and large, that's because we don't understand mental health. We have stigmatized it because a lot of what we have learned, we being like my generation, the baby boom generation, and perhaps a little bit of the gen behind me, we have learned most of what we know about mental health from social media and through different forms of media, whether it be TV or the movies. And we usually depict these folks with the mental health diagnosis in adverse ways.
I 100% agree. And I mean, growing up in the United Kingdom, I didn't come to Canada until 1987. Institutionalization in the insane asylum was very, very common. I mean, I did my psychiatric nursing component in a Victorian style asylum. And it, even though we don't do lobotomies anymore, they still had the rooms set up where they used to do them. And already, as you're driving up, it was set away from the town by a long, windy road. And when you got there, you just saw this red brick and mortar building that was so Victorian. And immediately I thought, can you imagine being brought in an ambulance to this place where you want to get help? The stigma's already started.
Of course.
Where is he? Oh, he's on that place on the hill.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tracey. Unfortunately, we see that on a lot of college campuses, although we are evolving from that. So if you need mental health care services, it's not where you might receive other services. For physical illnesses, you have to walk to that side of the campus. So when you're on your way over there, people know where you're going. And we are now adopting centralized locations that don't differentiate between physical and mental health, which is really, really important.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I keep driving home because I have a YouTube channel and I do a blog as well. And I keep driving home to everyone. Your brain and body are connected. They cannot operate in isolation from one another, and what happens in the head is going to affect the physical body, those aches and pains, that nausea, that muscle pain. And I think if we can start getting them to understand, I think we'll be one step closer. I know lots of people are now starting to talk about brain health, but my concern is they still go on how to, they don't tell you how to handle stress, or they don't identify that some stress is actually good for you.
Sure.
right? They keep saying, oh, no, de-stress your life. Don't be stressed. Don't be stressed. And that's become, I think, a dirty word, because now if you say I'm stressed, everyone's like, oh my goodness. Yeah. And
Sure.
instead of getting to the bottom of, well, actually, if you're stressed for an exam, that's good stress. That's a normal, a normal human response. So, with regards to the Quell Foundation, I follow you guys. I followed you now for years on social media, and I love what you guys are doing. One footnote: the awesome T-shirts that you had done, they don't ship to Canada. There you go. I tried.
I will personally put one in the mail to you. We'll offline, we'll talk about that. I will make sure we take care of that for you. I
Because
love that. I love that T-shirt, that logo, that stigma with the red line through it is
yes.
just essentially what we're trying to do. Let's remove this stigma.
And of course, on the weekend, you had the ceremony, and there was music, and you had so many of the students that were showcasing the
Yes.
T-shirt. And so on Instagram, I said, I love this. I'm going to order one right now. And I went through all the processing, and they said, we don't ship to Canada.
Oh, no. Well, I've just made a mental note of that. Okay, we'll make sure to see what we can do to rectify that, because it is a very, very popular shirt, especially now. I mean, we're just talking about mental health. The what we did on Saturday was special. Initially, it was to recognize the students that we have graduating. So the Quell Foundation has um, 82 scholarship recipients that are graduating this year.
So,
And we didn't want this day to go by, or this celebration to go by without acknowledging this huge personal accomplishment that each one of them had had. So I was speaking with a young artist over in Nashville, and we talked about her performing a concert for them. And by the end of the conversation, we said, let's see if we can just make this a music festival and celebrate the entire class of 2020, because they all feel the same way. And I went back to my team and said, hey, in 2 weeks, we're going to have a music festival and celebrate the entire graduating class of 2020. And I'm sure that it set them back in their seat, because there's only 2 weeks and we're not in the music festival business. But we were able to secure 11 bands or artists from across the United States and over in the UK, from 9 different states. And we had a concert for about 6.5 hours. And thousands of people tuned in to hear each one of these artists not only play for them and congratulate them, but acknowledge mental health in our world, in our country today, and just to make it a conversation. But it was a proud moment for us at 8:30 when we unplugged and said, we get it. And I hope people feel and recognize these students, how much we care about them and how important this achievement is to all of us.
oh, that was very obvious. And I thought it was, to me, it was a huge accomplishment, because for everyone that kept tuning in, there was so much positive reinforcement and encouragement. And I love the word empowering. It was empowering. And I think also what it does is, for maybe someone who tuned in that is struggling with some issues in their life, I'm hoping that by seeing all the students and seeing just everyone connected for a common cause, that it's given them the confidence to say, you know what, I'm going to reach out and I'm going to talk to someone and get help.
That is exactly what one of the impacts that we had hoped that it would have. And as a result of that, we did receive many, many emails and shout outs and certainly notes of gratitude. And we allowed folks to call in or to type in, let us know who they want us to give a shout out to. But each one of those artists was especially focused on making sure that they commented on mental health, and that either they personally, live with a diagnosis or some challenge, or they know somebody who has. So by speaking about it, we help people understand that you're certainly not alone in this.
I agree. And I know, we can't help it. It's the age of social media.
Of course.
And as much as we try and control it, all we can do is try and help educate kids. And I use children, teenagers, young adults, maybe in a category of kids. I'm sure they don't like that. But whilst we can teach them cybersecurity and safety and privacy, at the end of the day, parents can control to a certain degree what sites they go on, but we know that once they leave the house, if their friend has a device and has no restrictions, they can be exposed to lots of things. Lots of stars come out and talk about their challenges. Now, Lady Gaga is very vocal, and I think she is doing a lot. And I know that personally, some teenagers that just love her and really feel safe and supported, knowing that their idol is out there talking about it. Then we have a couple of other stars that casually mention, oh yes, I've had depression and I feel like this, but they time it for the release of a movie. And, all of a sudden the movie is great. And then when you go back to talk to them later, they deny they ever had it. And that to me is very infuriating, because I do not believe you should use any kind of illness or disorder to promote something. Especially because your target audience are the teenagers, are the young adults. And, I think it sends an inconsistent message there. So the Quell Foundation, I know right now you're going through applications, I believe, for the next round of scholarships.
We are. It's daunting. It's exciting. It's so incredibly exciting. So, we really do focus on this next generation of mental health care providers and students. And it's very, very deliberate for us. And it's deliberate in a way that I feel strongly that Gen Z and the generation that's coming out of college now and coming up into school, this is the group who is going to normalize this conversation. So how are they going to do that? Well, these folks are the same ones who made it completely socially unacceptable to voice a negative opinion about our LGBTQ family and friends. It's just socially unacceptable. It's the same thing with bullying. They stood up to bullying and they disallowed that. So I'm confident that when we bring them into the workspace, they're also going to be standing up for mental health. So we started this scholarship program in May of 2016. We had 14 applications. My wife and I funded all of them, and we give 3 scholarships away. So we give a scholarship away to students who have lost a parent or sibling to suicide. And that's our Survivor Scholarship. Our Fighter Scholarship is for students who have a mental health diagnosis, and in spite of that challenge, are continuing on to post-secondary education. And then finally, our 3rd scholarship is called Bridge the Gap, because when we are collectively successful in removing this stigma, we have to make sure that we have the resources available for them. Otherwise, we've done a horrible disservice to them. So since 2016, and including this year, we will have distributed about $1.8 million in scholarships. We have over 500 students right now, and they're in 49 states. We've got just 1 state left, and they're attending over 400 different universities. So we are absolutely thrilled with that. And we're proud of that. We have developed a junior board of directors. You mentioned earlier about having anxiety. You go onto campus, of course, you're going to have some anxiety your first year on campus, or your first college exam. But we're trying to help our students understand that that is okay, that is normal. And we do that because we have recruited our past scholarship recipients and also our alum who have since graduated to form a peer-to-peer group. So we don't just give our students a scholarship and wish them good luck for the year. We contact them, we email them, we call them continually. We have to text. Not a lot of students respond to email, but we reach out to them and see how they're doing. Ask them about their roommate. Ask them about the campus, what they like about it. And if they don't know where services are on campus, we let them know where services are, because we're very proactive in that. I think that what we've been able to accomplish now in 4.5 years is just extraordinary.
It's absolutely phenomenal. And I say, wow, kudos to you guys, because
thank you so much.
It is changing lives. And I always believe that, when someone has had that support and that acknowledgement and the education, they pay it forward all the time. And that, I think, is what's so important, because that's what's going to correct the misinformation about mental illness, and it's going to cancel out that stigma. I certainly hope that I'm still here when I can see that there is no more stigma. That, when kids start school, when they go into preschool, kindergarten, that mental health conversation begins, and it
Yes.
continues throughout the school years, even into college and university, because as we know, and I keep trying to drill it into people, the brain doesn't stop growing in men until you're 24 to 27. It's that frontal
Right.
executive functioning. In women, it's 20 to 24. That's why they say we're a little bit more mature earlier. But we're giving them so many responsibilities at age 18, because legally they're now classified at age 18 or 19 as an adult. And
Right.
that brain is still not fully developed to a degree where, they're still taking those risks. They can still have a little bit of socially inappropriate behavior.
Of
Um,
course.
the decisions they make may not be exactly what we would like, but we blame them. But it's like, no, that, your brain is not fully formed. And
That's
so
right.
they're going to have slight gaps. And yet we thrust so much responsibility and expectation on them. And I know, especially in colleges, suicide has increased there quite dramatically amongst the students. And that is
Mhm.
scary, because they have their future right at their fingertips.
Yes.
And they have the potential to be such amazing, awesome people, that are going to help all generations. And in a heartbeat, that life is snuffed out. And that, to me, that it's heartbreaking.
It is. That's exactly the word. It's absolutely heartbreaking. When we read the essays that the students are submitting with their applications, it is quite difficult. Last year we had over 1,000 applications, and I personally read every one of them. It took me a fair amount of time, and that being maybe 6 to 8 weeks after the scholarship period, for me to recover from reading and being immersed in such hardship and in the heartbreaking stories that I read, but it was also very hopeful that we're there to help them and talk to them. I honestly, and my team probably picks up the phone and calls one out of every five applicants to make sure they're doing okay. And we stay in close touch with them. You mentioned the suicide rates on college campuses right now and within this population of students. So we have a documentary called Lift the Mask, Portraits of Life with Mental Illness. That was born of me reading scholarship essays. I read so many of these, and I just wanted students to realize that they're not alone. But because, as we had spoken earlier, the face that we normally associate with the mental health diagnosis is inconsistent with what it actually is. So I reached out to several of our scholarship applicants and asked them if they would participate in the documentary. So it's called Portraits of Life with Mental Illness. Include in that is also myself, some senior executives, college students, and actually a high school student as well. I show that film on college campuses across the country. We have screened it to probably 3,500 to 4,000 students right now. We also show it at government agencies and as well as corporate events. When we show this documentary, we give them a pre-survey. So I'm working with an epidemiologist, and we're trying to determine the efficacy of this film's ability to positively influence your perception of mental health. So we asked, there's 27 questions. It's all de-identified. We've already collected all the data, and we have a lot of the analytics back now. And I just received it on Monday or last Friday, and it really was overwhelming. Um, some of the questions are, would you date somebody with a mental health diagnosis? Would you allow somebody with a mental health diagnosis to babysit your child? Would you recommend them for a job? Would you rent them a room in your house? Those are pretty personal questions. And so we gave them that survey. And then after they watched this film, we sent them the survey again. And again, all de-identified, and we have a woman, Kristen Schneider, Dr. Schneider down at Penn State Hershey Medical Center, and we have evaluated the numbers right now, and there are statistically significant changes in the response rates. So it would go from, no, I would not date somebody, to, yeah, it's very likely I would, because the film puts a face to it that's incongruent with what you thought. And it's really, really special. We're thrilled with what we're doing, and we're actually working on a second documentary right now about our first responder community, because they have the sixth highest rate of suicide by profession. So that film is by them, for them. It's another group of folks that we need to help. So,
absolutely, yes.
So I began that with college suicide rates. So after the screening, Tracey, we have a panel discussion, and often we have members that are in the film, subjects that are in the film, sitting on our panel, and we allow them to ask any questions they want of us. Some things that may have upset them during the film, and 100% of the time, which is an incredible number, 100% of the time, we have students, faculty, and guests from the community stand up and start sharing personal stories, saying, I was diagnosed with, I live with, I attempted. And that conversation starts within an auditorium of students. And it's almost like the panelists could get up and leave, because now they're just talking to each other. And that's exactly what our goal was with this film. 1 in 12 college students, according to a report that was released by the American College Health Association in May of 2018, 1 in 12 college students has developed a suicide plan. It's not even thinking about it. They've gone so far as to develop a suicide plan. When I read that, it absolutely broke my heart to think that so many students are walking around a campus that are so upset, and so, whether it's depressed or whatever mental health diagnosis they may have, or that their situation they feel is so gloomy that they can't do anything but take their life. That's really heartbreaking.
I mean, exactly what you're saying is when you get them together and they start opening up and sharing, and that's what we need to see more of. I mean, what actually got me started on this was, so I had written my book after my experience with depression in 2015 and my suicide. And what I was going through, I wrote the book because I said, I don't want anyone else to feel like they're on their own. They're on, that it's just them. And shortly after the book came out, I was asked to go to a middle school to talk to some teenagers, 15 years old, an English class. And it was because in my book, I use a lot of imagery to convey my emotions. So, I said my brain felt like an erupting volcano, and it just felt like I had pits of lava in there. The emotional pain was so overwhelming. And so she said, I'd love you to read sections out of your book, because some of them are struggling with creative writing. So I get to the class, and you can see behind me. So in my book, I have lots of illustrations, and I deliberately use them because they convey how I was feeling without using words. And so I think there's about 20 in the book. And so I'd had them enlarged for the book release party, but I took them with me. And as we were setting up the room, I started to put them behind me on the easel. And all of a sudden, the room went dead quiet. Before, they were talking to themselves and on their phones and everything. The room went so quiet. And all of a sudden, I could hear whispers. And it was one kid going to another, "That's how I feel today." And it was a picture of a little stick figure with this enormous black cloud, with hands outstretched, ready to snatch him into this dark cloud. And he goes, "That's how I feel today." And then I heard another one say, "That's how my mum says she feels." Yeah. And so I sit down and I start to read a chapter out of the book, and hands were going up everywhere. And they were like, "What can you do if you have depression? My mum has this. What can I do to help her?" And it was 1 hour of questions about mental health.
And how incredibly special is that you have that kind of an impact, that it opens up that type of dialogue in a non-confrontational way. And it's just a conversation. you're having a conversation with people about a subject that has traditionally been taboo. I think that is so fantastic. Congratulations, Tracey. That is so special.
I mean, it blew me out of the water because these were really well thought out, articulate questions that from kids that were very, very concerned and wanted to know how to help and do the right thing. And even at the end of the class, the English teacher came up and said, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see that coming. 2 weeks later, they asked me to return for Human Library. And so it's their career day. And I was there as a new author, although deep down now I think I was set up. But anyway, there as a new author. So it was a week before the career day. All the kids had to sign up for whose table they wanted to sit at. And so 8:30 comes, the first group sits down. I think it was about 10 teens. They were from ages 11 to 15. And I start talking. So this is how you write a book, and this is how you publish the book. And they're all looking at each other like, what's she talking about? And I stopped and I said, you seem confused. Are you sitting at the right table? They said, yes. I said, can you tell me why you signed up to sit at my table? And finally, one brave soul said, well, we heard about you from English class. You're the lady that escaped the rabbit hole. We want you to tell us how you did it. And that was it. Every 30 minutes, I had group after group after group of teenagers sitting down, telling me what was going on in their lives. What could they do? How can they help their friends? And I was like gobsmacked. And there were 2 students that really almost brought me to my knees. So obviously after each 30-minute session, as I would get ready for the next group to come in, there would always be 1 or 2 that would be waiting to talk to me. And
of course,
my defining moment was with 2 of them. A 15-year-old girl, absolutely drop dead gorgeous with long red hair, lifted up her sleeve and showed me she'd been cutting and whispered in my ear, I've just come out of hospital after my 2nd suicide attempt, 15. And then towards the end of the day, a 13-year-old boy that was very dark, hoodie concealing his face, did not participate in the group, was waiting, asked me, very embarrassed, can I talk to you? I said, yes, of course, fell into my arms, sobbing his heart out and said, I've been in the rabbit hole 7 years, when will I escape? And I went and spent 20 minutes talking to him and, giving him suggestions, and he calmed right down and he said, thank you so much. And at the end of the day, as I was packing up, the counselor came to me, the school counselor, and said, we didn't bring you here to counsel the kids. That was not your job. And I said, what do you mean? And she goes, you're not supposed to sit and talk to them about things like that. And she goes, that's my job. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but when they open up to me and tell me what's going on and want help, I'm going to give them my time. And she said, well, you know him. And she referred to the 13-year-old boy. She goes, you're wasting your time. He's a lost cause. And it was all I could do not to go across the table and punch her.
Absolutely.
And,
sure.
And that was it. I cried all the way home. And I had 63 teenagers open up to me. And I'm talking to a doctor friend. And I said, there must be something going on with that school. And he goes, no. He says, think about it. They knew about you. You're the lady that escaped the rabbit hole. Yeah. And they wanted to talk to you. And they said, kids will only talk to someone who's been there, done that, know what it's like. And that was the defining moment where I changed my focus from promoting the book to let's be a voice for the kids.
Yes. Oh, that's an amazing, what a wonderful story. That's such a wonderful story. And I will think about that young man for some time to come now. Certainly. I hope he's doing well.
He is.
Now, Tracey, we showed this film. I've always showed it on college campuses. I kind of drew the line there at 18 years old because we don't need any parental consent. for starters, and because some of the subject matter is difficult. One of the young ladies in our film, Michaela, again, absolutely a breathtakingly beautiful young adult, who at 13 years old, and she's from an interracial family, a well-to-do family. At 13, she came home and found that her 16-year-old brother had taken his life. And she talks about this in the film. Now, she and her brother were both nationally ranked swimmers, National Honor Society. They were just straight, they were good, solid students. But when she called the 911 operator and there was no other resources available, she was asked if she might be able to cut him down. And when you hear that, your heart breaks every time, because this is a 13-year-old girl. She grabbed a pair of pliers, and as she says, what do I know? I'm a 13-year-old girl. So she went from trying to cut him down to looking down at his afro saying, I'm here, I'm not going to leave you. Well, what happened to Michaela over the following 6 or 7 to 8 years of her life was just horrifying. And if we judged Michaela at 18 years old, we would never have known the 13-year-old Michaela. So yes, she had several arrests. No police were called on her. She was hospitalized. She stopped swimming. But I found Michaela because of an op-ed she wrote, and she was one of our scholarship recipients. In fact, Michaela received all 3 of our scholarships. And today, that young woman is a psychiatric nurse practitioner seeing patients, and she has lived experience. So I tell you that story because it is a very difficult part of the film. And we were in North Carolina, and it was just an open invitation to the community. It was at a hospital in North Carolina. And at the end of it, we were on the panel. And when we left the room, there was a young lady up at the back, often happens, as you know. And she said, I just wanted to tell you that I really enjoyed your film. And I was kind of taken back because she was young. I said, you did? Well, thank you so much. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. How old are you? She said, oh, I'm 13 years old. I go, okay, what did you like about the film? And she said, I liked Dennis and Liz because they sat on a park bench talking about suicide. Dennis is Liz's son. And her mom patted her on the back and said, tell him why you liked that. She said, because now I know I don't have to kill myself. I can just talk to my mom. And that still catches me because I'm listening to a 13-year-old girl saying she had already attempted suicide once. And here, because of this film and watching Michaela and watching Dennis and Liz and all the folks in this film, she knows she doesn't have to kill herself now. She can just talk to her mom. And it was everything I could do to get out of there with my composure, because I couldn't hold on to it. Once I got into a place where I was around people, I lost it. It just broke my heart to think that 13 years old, this is what's in her mind. So you made impacts on people, and like I often say to the people who are in this work, we will never know the thousands and thousands of people whose lives we have impacted, and that's not important. But the fact is, we have impacted it by the work that we're doing, and it is difficult work sometimes, but it is very, very rewarding, because if nobody else receives a wonderful message from that film, this young lady won't take her life because of it. And it's so powerful.
It's saving a life. And what it's also done is that if she's talking with friends or she hears of a friend who may be in a similar situation, she knows what to say, Yes. And I think I love that. And it's a shame that a film like that could not be shown in middle school, in high school, because I keep reinforcing all the time, for the kids to reach out if they do not feel they can talk to a parent, to reach out to a trusted adult, someone who will sit there and listen to them and be that mentor, that guiding force, because every single kid needs one. And,
Absolutely.
I keep stressing in the podcast is that if you're watching this and you're saying, well, this doesn't affect me, I don't have kids, Yes, it does, because you can be that person that can make a difference.
You know what I will say? You are absolutely right. And I think that because, and like yourself, I've talked to thousands and thousands of people, and I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say to me, I don't know anybody that has a mental health challenge or anybody who has lost their life to suicide. So I would say that when you open the door to that conversation, you allow other people to step through it. And I'll use myself as an example. And it was a difficult decision early on when I started the foundation, because while I wanted to help people with a mental health challenge. Uh, um, I couldn't just say, hey, this is for you people. I had to include myself. So, having been, as we talked about at the top of the show, that I am a veteran. I spent over 12 years on submarines. Then I went into healthcare for 17 years. And I'm 6'4", 235 pounds. So I have a presence. Um, but when my son, which is the genesis of the entire Quell Foundation, when my son was arrested after a series of events, I really struggled. I could not see the value in waiting for tomorrow. So, standing in the driveway of a home that I had bought, my wife and I had bought for my son, realized that he would never be back in that house again. Uh, I ended up calling a suicide hotline. I called the VA and I called the VA's hotline because I was in a really, really bad place. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would be in that position. And it doesn't matter who you know or what you have to live with. When you get to that point, it's very, very scary. So when I made the personal decision to share that with folks that I had been diagnosed with clinical depression, I was nervous. I was absolutely nervous because I was waiting for all my buddies from the military to come at me, and all my peers, all my colleagues in the professional environment in hospitals to come back at me and give me a hard time. The exact opposite happened. The very first email I got was from a dear friend that I was on my first submarine with, and he shared with me his story of an attempted suicide. And it made everything okay. I got more support and more people sharing their stories with me because I put a face to it. And it was really special. It's sometimes it's still a little bit scary, but I talk about it in the film, but I talk about it about halfway through the film, and you don't see it coming. And it's something that is pretty powerful.
No, I agree. And I think that is why people like us are doing the work that we're doing, because you can you can connect with, those that I always say when I've had some hate mail about, about what I'm doing, that's life. But, you know, when I always reach out back to them and say, can you tell me honestly that you do not know anyone who has struggled with anxiety, depression, OCD, bipolar, somebody? And I've yet to have somebody come back and say, I don't know anyone.
Yes.
They always know someone, whether or not it was a friend in school, if they're an adult, someone in the workplace, a neighbor, a family member, they know of somebody. And that then will open the dialogue, because I think sometimes they personalize it and think, well, I don't have anything and I'm fine. And,
Right.
and later on, I say what you have to understand is sometimes there can be a series of life events and stressors, which can, and that's exactly what happened to me, that can, you suddenly find out you're down that rabbit hole. And
Yes.
you may not have seen it coming, or you may have realized something was happening, but you didn't understand how bad it would get. And,
I agree.
And I think that's why it's so important that we tell our stories. As I was pressing that button to publish my book, I had that, oh my goodness, how are people going to react to me? Because it's very raw. I describe in great detail the suicide and what was going on in my brain. And I thought, but that's the only way you can reach people, if you are 100% transparent.
Yes.
And say, I lived through this, and I'm here today to tell you it can and will get better if you're willing to. You've got, I mean, you have to make that commitment. You must want to get better because it's hard and it can be a lot of work at times. But once you open that door and you have that support and the resources, you can feel that change coming. It's very slow to begin with, but that kind of lifts you up, and I kept saying the light started to get brighter at the end of the tunnel.
I love that. It's something that I say often. I was very, very fortunate to have been invited to give the commencement speech several years ago at Penn State. And towards the end of the commencement speech, I asked everybody a very pointed question. If you knew somebody who could not see the light at the end of the tunnel, would you go sit with them in the dark? Would you stand up and stand beside them to show them your support? And if your answer is yes, I invited them all to stand up right there and right then. Now, nobody knew that I was going to do that because I didn't share it intentionally. I didn't want to take the chance that somebody might say that's not a good idea. Well, when I asked them to stand up, Tracey, 14,000 people stood up in that auditorium like I flipped the switch. I'm sure that graduating class, well, they won't remember my name, but they will remember what I said with that. And you sometimes need to be that light at the end of the tunnel. Something I always ask folks, whether it's one-on-one conversation or after a screening, is, can you tell me the day that you chose to have depression? Do you remember that day? Do you remember the day that you wanted to have PTSD or anxiety or bipolar disorder or schizoaffective? Tell me about that day. That's the point. Nobody chooses. A mental health diagnosis is both unsolicited and unwelcome. And when we just accept that it is not something, my choice, my being diagnosed with clinical depression was not my choice. It's not something that I did and caused that. So people have to understand that this is something that happens to you. And when we get to that point, we make it okay to talk about it. And it is okay to talk about it. It's so important that we talk about this.
I agree. So we're actually running out of time. We went over, but you've got such wonderful things to say. That's not going to be a problem. That my audience is going to love it. So parting words, Kevin. Interestingly, I told you that I have a very high audience in UK, Canada, New Zealand, USA, yes, and Australia. And what's very interesting is that the highest quota is 18 to 35 males, which very surprising. Now, I've thought that it could be that maybe lots of males may have a shared account with their wife, and so it shows up on Facebook, when I get the demographics. But it's definitely a very high quota of males, which I actually find very positive, because we know that this is Male Mental Health Awareness Month, and yes, there's still a lot of stigma attached to men being honest and telling others what's going on with them, because there's that stereotypical, you're the breadwinner and you're supposed to help everyone else. So parting words to a teenager, a young adult, even anyone who's listening to this that are thinking something is happening to me, something is different, I'm feeling hopeless, I'm confused by what's going on. Words of guidance.
I would say, I'm sorry that you're going through that, certainly. That we need to share our stories with each other. We need to open up and talk to each other about it. If you're going through something, know that you're not alone. The numbers around suicide and overdose, especially in the United States, are just horrific. 1.4 million people a year, 48,000 successful, I don't like that word, completed suicides in 2018. That's just a tremendous, tremendous number. Over 70,000 overdoses. You are not alone. So when you hear those kind of numbers, you're not alone. That there is 1 in 5 people will live or be diagnosed with some form of mental health challenge in their life. Reach out and talk to somebody. Talk to your friend, talk to your parents, send an email, tweet at one of our accounts. Just start communication going, because I know guys especially have to put on this body armor. It's like our first responders. They never get to take it off. You don't get to come home and take off your badge and no longer be a cop or EMS or a firefighter. You're always that to the community, to the neighborhood, to your family. Same thing with gentlemen. You don't get to come home and just say, I'm not doing okay, because you have to be home and be present for your family. It's okay to have a chink in your armor. Most of us do, and we can fix it. We can talk about it, and we can come back from this. I haven't had the need to see a therapist in many years, but the work that I'm doing is my therapy right now. It is something I feel like I'm helping other people by opening the door and allowing them to come and speak with me about it. So my contact information is available. Reach out to national hotlines if that's what you need to do. There's crisis text lines, meet you where you're at, and it's all manned by folks who want to help you and who have lived experience as well.
I agree. Amen. That's a beautiful end to the show. Kevin, we could talk for hours more.
We could.
It's when you have a passion about something and you're with like-minded people, there is so much dialogue to share. Thank you so very much. I consider this was a blessed opportunity for me. I just love talking to you. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that our relationship went here. It could have gone sideways a year ago, but it did not. And here we are, going to make a great difference. So thank you for reaching out to me and inviting me to be part of this. And God bless you for the work that you're doing. I'm happy to support in any way I can.
Thank you, and the same to you. So we're going to take a very quick commercial break. And on this break, you're actually going to see information about Kevin, how to connect with the Quell Foundation, and how to connect with him. And we'll be right back.
Kevin Lynch is a public speaker, a public servant, and the owner and CEO of the Quell Foundation. Kevin's a 12-year veteran of the United States Naval Submarine Force, and after serving his country, invested more than 16 years in the private sector, advancing his career as a member of the service management team at 3 different hospital systems. After working with and helping his son, who suffered from severe anxiety, depression, and suicidal tendencies, Kevin created the Quell Foundation with a mission to reduce the number of suicides, overdoses, and incarcerations of people with mental health illnesses. The following year, Kevin was invited to speak at the White House during the Making Healthcare Better series on mental health, and since then has distributed over $1 million to students attending nearly 400 universities and colleges in 47 states across the nation. Kevin's also a lifetime member of the Disabled American Veterans and the United States Submarine Veterans Association. Make sure to visit the Quell Foundation at thequellfoundation.org or on any social media at the Quell Foundation.
Welcome back, everyone. I do hope you enjoyed my conversation today with Kevin Lynch. What an awesome guy doing great work. Please do check him out on social media, his website, and the Quell Foundation. They are doing amazing work. So this concludes another episode of Engage, Educate, and Empower. As always, I'd like to thank you for your continued support. I really do appreciate it. Please stay safe, stay well, and I'll join you again, same time, same place next Thursday. Take care, everybody.